Dad, why is no one clapping for her? The 7-year-old's hands moved in sign language, asking the question that would change 3 lives forever. Henry looked at the woman on stage, diploma in hand, hope dying in her eyes as she scanned 1,000 faces for just one that cared. No one stood, no one cheered. The room was silent except for the awkward shuffling of strangers. He didn't know her name, didn't know she was a billionaire's daughter, didn't know she'd been abandoned her entire life. He just knew no one should stand that alone. So he started clapping, and that single choice became the beginning of everything. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Henry Williams felt his son's small hand tug at his sleeve as they stood outside the university auditorium. He glanced at his phone, 2 more deliveries waiting, tips he desperately needed. But Caleb's eyes were fixed on the graduates lining up in their caps and gowns, wonder written all over his 7-year-old face. Dad, can we watch? Just for a little bit? The signs were so careful, so precise. Henry had spent 3 years teaching his son this language after a devastating illness stole Caleb's hearing. 3 years of building a new way to communicate, a new life from the ruins of their old one.
Henry checked the time again. He should say no. Should get back to work, keep hustling, keep surviving. But Caleb rarely asked for anything. He'd learned early that money was tight, that every choice had a cost. Okay, buddy, just for a little while. They slipped into the back row as the ceremony began. Henry tried to focus on the deliveries he was missing, the calculations running through his mind. Rent due in 5 days, Caleb's therapy appointment next week, the credit card bill he'd been avoiding. But his son's fascination pulled him back to the present. Graduate after graduate crossed the stage to thunderous applause. Families erupted in cheers, cameras flashed like lightning, banners waved with names written in glitter and pride. Henry watched it all with a familiar hollow ache in his chest. His wife should have been here. Not here specifically, but here, in life, beside him, planning for Caleb's future milestones. But Angela was gone. 3 years now since the aneurysm that took her, without warning, without goodbye, leaving Henry to figure out how to be both mother and father to a little boy who couldn't hear the world anymore. Rebecca Hamilton. Henry's attention snapped to the stage. A young woman stood and walked toward the stairs with careful, measured steps. Something about the way she moved made him focus. Her eyes swept the audience, searching. She climbed the stairs, accepted her diploma, and turned to face the crowd. The applause was polite, scattered, obligatory.
Henry's eyes scanned the auditorium, looking for the explosion of joy that had greeted every other graduate, looking for proud parents, siblings with cameras, friends holding embarrassing baby photos. Nothing. No one stood for Rebecca Hamilton. No section erupted in celebration. No one called her name. She stood there, clutching her diploma with both hands, and Henry saw it, the flicker of hope in her eyes slowly dying as she scanned the crowd. She was searching for someone, waiting for a face that wasn't there. The moment stretched too long, painfully long. Caleb tugged his sleeve again. Dad, why is no one clapping for her? The question, signed with such innocent confusion, cracked something open in Henry's chest. He knew that kind of loneliness, knew what it felt like to stand somewhere expecting support and finding only emptiness. He stood up and started clapping, loud, deliberate, refusing to let this woman stand there in silence. Caleb joined him immediately, his small hands creating a rhythm that echoed in the vast space. Other attendees glanced back at them, curious about the commotion in the last row, but Henry didn't stop, couldn't stop. Rebecca's eyes found them. For a moment, she just stared at this man and little boy, complete strangers, the only people in a room of hundreds who chose to see her, something flickered across her face. Surprise, confusion, and then something that looked dangerously close to tears. She nodded once, a small, fragile acknowledgement. Then she walked off the stage.
The ceremony continued, but Henry couldn't focus. That image of her standing there, alone and searching, had burrowed into his mind. He kept thinking about what could leave someone so isolated on what should be one of the proudest days of their life. When the ceremony ended and people flooded into the courtyard, Henry told himself he needed to leave, had to get back to work. But his feet carried him outside anyway, eyes scanning the crowd. He found her standing near a fountain, still in her cap and gown, watching other graduates embrace their families. Her face was composed, carefully neutral, but Henry recognized the mask. He'd worn it himself countless times. The expression that said, "I'm fine," when nothing felt fine at all. Before Henry could decide whether to approach, Caleb spotted her and took off running. "Wait, Caleb!" But his son was already standing in front of her, waving his hands to get her attention. Rebecca turned, startled. She looked down at the little boy grinning up at her. Then her eyes lifted to Henry rushing over. "I'm so sorry," Henry said, slightly out of breath. But Caleb saw her hearing aids and was already signing, his small hands moving with enthusiastic precision. "You did great up there! Congratulations!" Rebecca's eyes went wide. Her hands, which had been hanging at her sides, slowly lifted.
"You know sign language?" Henry felt something shift in the air between them. A recognition, a connection that went beyond words. "My son has hearing loss," he signed and spoke simultaneously, a habit he'd developed to help Caleb feel included in conversations. "I'm Henry, this is Caleb." "Rebecca." Her signs were fluid, natural. And when she smiled at Caleb, it was tentative but genuine, the first real smile Henry had seen from her. "We're the ones clapping for you," Caleb signed proudly. "You earned that diploma." Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. She blinked rapidly, then signed back, "Thank you. That meant more than you know." Henry knew he should make small talk, say something polite and move on, but the question slipped out before he could stop it. "Your family couldn't make it?" He saw her flinch and immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "No family here," she signed simply. The smile faded. "It's okay. I'm used to it." 4 words that carried the weight of years. "I'm used to it." Henry knew that phrase intimately, knew how many disappointments it took to build that kind of resignation, how many times you had to be let down before you stopped expecting anything different. Caleb, bless him, didn't understand the heavy undercurrent of the conversation. He tugged on Rebecca's down and pointed excitedly at the fountain. "Want to see the ducks? They're so cool." Rebecca looked at Henry, uncertain, probably wondering why these strangers were still talking to her, what they wanted. Henry shrugged, offering a small smile. "If you're not busy, you're welcome to join us. We were going to grab some ice cream, hang out at the park nearby. Nothing fancy. Just, you shouldn't have to celebrate alone today." He watched her internal debate play out across her face. Suspicion warred with longing. Self-protection battled hope. Finally, she nodded. "I'd like that." The park was a 10-minute walk from campus. Henry bought 3 ice cream cones from a vendor's cart, vanilla for Caleb, chocolate for Rebecca, and strawberry for himself. He didn't let himself calculate how this unplanned expense would affect his grocery budget for the week. Some things are worth it. They found a bench near a small pond where ducks paddled lazily. Caleb immediately ran off to watch them. His silent laughter was visible in the shake of his shoulders and the brightness of his eyes. "He seems happy," Rebecca sighed, watching Caleb with something soft in her expression. "He's a good kid," Henry replied. "Resilient. Been through more than any 7-year-old should have to handle." He hadn't meant to say that last part, hadn't meant to open that door, but something about Rebecca made him feel safe. Maybe it was the loneliness he recognized in her. Maybe it was the way she looked at Caleb.
Not with pity, but with understanding. His mom passed away 3 years ago, Henry continued, the words coming easier than they had in months. Brain aneurysm, sudden. One morning she was making breakfast, and by afternoon she was gone. 3 months later, Caleb got sick, high fever, an infection that damaged his auditory nerves. Lost his hearing at 4 years old. He felt Rebecca's hand on his arm. When he looked at her, her eyes were glistening. "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine." "Yeah." Henry swallowed hard. "It's been just us ever since. Learning sign language, figuring out how to navigate the world all over again. Some days are harder than others, but we manage." He didn't tell her about the 3 part-time jobs. Didn't mention the food delivery service, the weekend shifts at the warehouse, the freelance coding he did late at night when Caleb was asleep. Didn't talk about the master's degree in computer science that felt worthless now, or the startup job he'd loved before his life imploded. "What about you?" Henry asked, shifting focus. "Graduating must be exciting. What comes next?" Rebecca's hand stilled. She looked away, watching Caleb chase a particularly bold duck. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never really known what comes next. I've just existed, done what was expected of me." There was something in the way she signed it, a resignation that went deeper than career uncertainty. "What were you studying?" "Business administration." Her signs were careful, measured. "My father's choice. He has plans for me."
"And what do you want?" The question seemed to surprise her. Her hands hovered in the air, uncertain. No one's ever asked me that before. Henry felt a surge of anger toward people he'd never met. What kind of life had this woman lived where no one cared about her actual desires? "Well, I'm asking," he signed. "What does Rebecca want?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it, "To matter to someone. To be seen as more than what I can offer." Henry didn't fully understand what she meant by that, but he understood the loneliness underneath it. "For what it's worth, I'm glad we crashed your graduation." Rebecca laughed, a real, genuine sound that transformed her entire face. "I'm glad you did too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Caleb's antics with the ducks. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Henry reluctantly checked his phone. 2 missed deliveries, 3 angry texts from the app. He'd probably lost his evening bonus. Worth it. "I should get Caleb home for dinner. But would you want to join us sometime for dinner? I mean, I'm not a great cook, but I make decent mac and cheese. Caleb swears it's the best thing in the world, though his standards might be low." Rebecca looked surprised, then pleased, then uncertain again. "I'd really like that," she signed finally. They exchanged numbers. As Henry and Caleb walked away, Caleb signed excitedly. "I like her, Dad. She's nice, and she talks like me." Henry ruffled his son's hair, smiling. "Yeah, buddy, I like her too." Behind them, Rebecca stood by the fountain, watching them disappear into the evening. For the first time in longer than she could remember, something warm flickered in her chest. Hope. The first dinner happened 3 days later. Rebecca showed up at Henry's apartment with a grocery bag, nervous in a way she hadn't been since childhood. The apartment was small, really small, but Caleb's artwork covered the fridge, and there was laughter in the cramped kitchen as they burned the mac and cheese together. She came back the following week, then twice the next week. By the 2nd month, she had a standing invitation, Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Saturdays too. She'd help Caleb with homework while Henry cooked. They'd play board games on the worn carpet, watch movies with subtitles on. Rebecca never mentioned her background. She took the bus, wore modest clothes, insisted on splitting grocery costs. And for the first time in her life, she felt seen for who she was, not what she had. Henry noticed things about her that no one else ever had. The way she smiled when Caleb signed something funny, how she'd get lost in thought while doing dishes, the loneliness that flickered in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. And Rebecca noticed him, too. The exhaustion he tried to hide, the way he'd check his phone anxiously between conversations. Calculating, always calculating. How he made everything fun for Caleb, even when he was clearly running on empty. They were becoming something. Neither of them dared to name it yet, but it was there, growing stronger with every shared meal, every late-night conversation, every moment of comfortable silence. 3 months in, they started staying up after Caleb went to bed, sitting on Henry's tiny balcony with cheap wine, talking about dreams and disappointments, fears and hopes, getting closer, building trust. 4 months in, Henry almost kissed her. They were washing dishes side by side, and Rebecca laughed at something Caleb had signed earlier, and Henry turned to look at her, really look at her, and almost closed the distance. But he pulled back, uncertain, afraid of ruining what they had. Rebecca noticed, and she almost kissed him first, but she didn't. Couldn't, not while she was still hiding who she really was. By month 6, they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt like family. Rebecca had a key to the apartment. Her toothbrush sat in the bathroom. Caleb called her Becca and saved his best drawings for her. They were building something beautiful, something real. But Rebecca's secret sat between them like a wall she didn't know how to climb. The knock on the apartment door came at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening, right on schedule. Caleb jumped up from his homework and ran to answer it. Rebecca stood in the hallway, holding a grocery bag and wearing the same modest jeans and sweater she always wore when she visited. "Hey!" Caleb signed enthusiastically. "We're making pancakes for dinner because Dad says breakfast food doesn't have rules." Rebecca laughed, stepping inside. "Breakfast for dinner is the best. Did you get the chocolate chips I suggested?" "Obviously." Henry emerged from the kitchen, flour somehow already in his hair. "I have no control over this household anymore. You two have formed an alliance against me." "Democracy in action," Rebecca signed with a grin. This was what she'd never known she was missing. The casual warmth, the easy teasing, the sense of being part of something real. In her father's mansion, meals were served by staff on fine china in a dining room that echoed with silence. Here, in this cramped kitchen with mismatched plates and a wobbly table, she felt more at home than she ever had in 25 years. They cooked together, burning the first batch of pancakes and laughing about it. Caleb insisted on flipping the next batch himself, resulting in one pancake on the ceiling that they decided to leave there as modern art. After dinner, they played board games on the worn living room carpet. Rebecca couldn't remember the last time she'd sat on the floor. Couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed this much. At one point, Caleb fell asleep against her shoulder during a movie, subtitles on, volume low. Rebecca looked down at his peaceful face and felt her heart crack open. Henry noticed. He always noticed.
"You're good with him," he signed from his spot on the couch. "He makes it easy," Rebecca replied. "He's special. So are you." The weight of those 3 signs hung in the air between them. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. Over the past 6 months, moments like this had been happening more frequently. Loaded glances, touches that lingered too long, conversations that danced around feelings neither of them had voiced. Rebecca carefully moved Caleb to the couch, covering him with a blanket. Henry gestured to the small balcony, barely big enough for 2 people, but it had become their place for late-night conversations. They stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city sprawled below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Rebecca had a penthouse view that cost more than most people made in a year, but she preferred this. The slightly rusted railing, the sounds of the neighborhood, the proximity to real life. Henry handed her a glass of cheap wine. They had developed this ritual. After Caleb fell asleep, they'd sit out here and talk about everything and nothing. But tonight, Henry's expression was more serious than usual. "Can I ask you something?" he signed. "You never talk about your family, about your life before we met, and I've never pushed because I figured you'd tell me when you were ready, but Rebecca, who are you, really?" Rebecca felt her heart start to race. 6 months. 6 months of this beautiful, simple life. 6 months of being just Rebecca, not Richard Hamilton's daughter, not the hearing-impaired heiress, not someone to use or manipulate, just herself. She'd known this moment would come, had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her mind. But now, looking at Henry's open, honest face, all her carefully prepared words evaporated. "If I tell you," she signed slowly, "everything might change, and I don't want it to change." "Rebecca," Henry set down his wineglass and took her hands, "nothing you say will change how I see you, how Caleb and I feel about you." She wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her otherwise. Everyone changed when they knew. Everyone started calculating what they could get from her, how they could benefit from proximity to wealth and power. But this was Henry. Henry who had clapped for her when no one else would. Henry who had invited her into his life without asking for anything in return. Henry who had shown her what genuine kindness looked like. If she couldn't trust him, she couldn't trust anyone. "My father is Richard Hamilton," she signed, watching his face carefully. For a moment, Henry just stared at her. Then his hands moved uncertain. "Hamilton Tech? That Richard Hamilton?" She nodded, tears already forming. "I didn't tell you because everyone who knows treats me differently. They want something, connections, money, opportunities. They're nice because of what I can offer, not because of who I am. But you and Caleb, you saw me, just me. And I've never had that before. I was terrified that if you knew, We'd what?" Henry signed. "Start treating you like a bank account instead of a person? Rebecca, do you really think that's who we are?" "No," she signed it frantically. "No, I know you're not like that. But everyone else, everyone who's ever gotten close to me, they all changed. Even the people I thought were real friends, they all wanted something eventually." Henry was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca could see him processing, working through the implications. "That must have been incredibly lonely," he finally signed. It wasn't what she'd expected. No anger at the deception, no immediate recalculation of the relationship, just empathy. The tears spilled over. "It was. It is. My mother died when I was 10. After she was gone, my father remarried, and his new wife made sure I stayed invisible, out of sight, out of mind. My father loves me in his own way, but he doesn't know how to show it. He's chosen a business deal over my graduation. He's chosen business over me my entire life." "That's why no one was there," Henry said softly. "Your graduation." Rebecca nodded. "He promised he'd come. I even pleaded with him. But Singapore couldn't wait, apparently. Nothing can ever wait when it comes to business. I had everything money could buy. The best schools, beautiful clothes, unlimited resources. But I didn't have anyone who actually saw me, who knew me. Until I met you both." Henry reached across and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I'm glad you trusted me enough to tell me that," he signed with his free hand. "And nothing changes, Rebecca. You're still just you to us. The woman who makes Caleb laugh, who taught me that it's possible to feel—" He paused, and Rebecca saw vulnerability flash across his face. "To feel what?" she encouraged. "To feel like maybe I'm not alone anymore," Henry admitted. "Like maybe we could be something more than friends. If you wanted that." Rebecca's breath caught. She'd wanted this for months, but had been too afraid to hope. "I've wanted that since the park, since you bought me ice cream and didn't ask for anything in return. I was just afraid you'd think I was broken, too damaged by my lonely life to be what you needed." "Rebecca!" Henry moved closer, his eyes intense. "We're all a little broken. I'm definitely broken. A widower with mounting debt, working 3 jobs to keep our heads above water, carrying grief I still don't know how to process. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can help each other heal."
3 jobs? Rebecca's hands moved quickly. Henry, why didn't you tell me? He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Same reason you didn't tell me about your father, I guess. Pride, fear, not wanting to be seen as a charity case. I've been scraping by since Angela died, trying to give Caleb everything he needs while barely affording rent. Rebecca's mind was already working. What about your career? You have a master's degree in computer science. You mentioned that once. Why aren't you working in your field? Henry's expression darkened. I tried. For 2 years I tried. I have this idea, accessibility software that could revolutionize how people with hearing loss interact with technology. It's good, Rebecca, really good. But I'm nobody. No connections, no track record, no way to get in front of the right people. I've pitched it to dozens of companies. Most don't even respond. The ones that do give me 15 minutes with some junior executive who's checking their phone the whole time. Tell me about it, Rebecca signed. The software. What does it do? Henry hesitated. Then his hands began moving with more enthusiasm than Rebecca had seen from him in months. He described an AI-powered system that could translate spoken language into sign language in real time, with context awareness and emotional nuance that current systems lacked. It could work with video calls, in-person conversations, educational settings, workplace meetings.
As he explained, Rebecca's excitement grew. She understood technology, understood the market in ways Henry didn't realize. This wasn't just good. It was revolutionary. It could change millions of lives. Henry, this is incredible, she signed when he finished. Why hasn't anyone funded it? He laughed bitterly. Because I'm a delivery driver with a sleeping infant company and no pedigree. I actually had a meeting at Hamilton Tech about 18 months ago, got past some initial screener, had 15 minutes with a junior VP who spent the whole time looking out the window, said it was interesting but not aligned with their current priorities. Rebecca felt anger surge through her. She knew exactly how her father's company worked, knew how many brilliant ideas probably got dismissed because the person presenting them didn't have the right credentials or connections. Let me help you, she signed quickly. Rebecca, no, I didn't tell you this to... I know you didn't, but Henry, listen to me. This idea deserves to exist. It could change lives for people like Caleb, like me. Not just the technology, but what it represents. Connection, accessibility, inclusion. Let me help you refine the pitch, connect you with the right investors. Not because of my father, I won't use his name unless absolutely necessary, but because I understand this world, and I can see what you can't see from the outside. I can't ask you to...
You're not asking, I'm offering. Rebecca's hands moved intensely. For my entire life, I've been told I'm incompetent, that I need my father's money, his power, his name to accomplish anything. Let me prove that wrong. Let me be useful for once. Let me do something that actually matters. Henry studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. Partners? Partners, Rebecca agreed. They shook hands formally, then both started laughing at the absurdity of it. The handshake turned into a hug, which turned into something more, a moment of closeness neither of them had experienced in years. When they pulled back, Henry signed, "This won't be easy. We'll face rejection, setbacks, people who don't believe in us." "I know," Rebecca signed back, "but we'll face it together, and maybe that's what makes the difference." The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Rebecca and Henry worked late into the night, refining the pitch deck, running financial projections, identifying target investors. Rebecca used her knowledge of the industry, not her father's name, to get meetings with venture capital firms that specialized in accessibility technology. She sat in on every pitch, not as Richard Hamilton's daughter, but as Henry's partner. She asked pointed questions, challenged assumptions, forced investors to see the vision Henry had been carrying alone for so long.
And something remarkable happened. Rebecca discovered she was good at this. Not just competent, but genuinely skilled.
She had instincts for business strategy, for reading people, for knowing which investors would understand the mission and which were just chasing returns. After one particularly successful pitch meeting, Henry pulled her aside in the parking lot. "You were amazing in there," he signed. "The way you handled that question about scalability, I wouldn't have thought of that angle." Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. "I was just helping—" "No," Henry interrupted firmly. "Stop diminishing what you do. You're not just helping. You're transforming this entire project. You're seeing angles I missed, making connections I couldn't. You're brilliant, Rebecca. Own that." She stared at him, tears pricking her eyes. No one had ever talked to her like this. No one had ever seen her capabilities and celebrated them instead of using them. "I've spent my whole life being told I was only valuable because of my last name. I didn't know I could be valuable for myself. Well, now you know. And I'm going to keep reminding you until you believe it." The funding came through on a Thursday afternoon. A venture capital firm specializing in assistive technology offered them a significant seed round, enough to quit all 3 of Henry's jobs, hire a small team, and get the software into development.
When Henry got the call, he was at Rebecca's apartment, the first time she'd invited him to her actual home. She'd been terrified of how he'd react to the luxury, but he'd simply looked around and signed. "Nice place, but I like my apartment better. It has better people in it." Now, watching him read the investment offer, Rebecca saw tears stream down his face. "We did it!" he signed, his hands shaking. "Rebecca, we actually did it!" She threw her arms around him and they held each other in the middle of her cavernous penthouse living room, 2 people who'd been broken in different ways, now healing together. The company launched 6 months after that call. They named it Signal Bridge, a name that represented both the technology and what it had done for them personally. Henry led the technical development, working with a team of engineers and deaf consultants to ensure the software was authentic and effective. Rebecca managed operations and business strategy, discovering that she had a gift for managing people and navigating complex negotiations. Caleb, now 8, became their unofficial chief tester. He'd come to the office after school, a small space they'd rented near Henry's apartment, and provide brutally honest feedback on the user interface. "Dad, this button is stupid. No one wants to click 17 times to start a conversation." Henry would laugh and make adjustments. Rebecca watched these interactions with joy, seeing how Henry's son had become her son too, even though no one had officially labeled it that way yet.
One evening, a year after they'd met at her graduation, Henry asked Rebecca to meet him at the park, the same park where they'd eaten ice cream that first day. She arrived to find Caleb on the swings and Henry standing by the fountain with his hands behind his back. "What's going on?" she signed, curious. Henry looked nervous, more nervous than she'd ever seen him, including during their biggest investor pitch. "I've been thinking," he signed. "About a year ago, I saw a woman standing alone at her graduation. No family, no friends, just profound loneliness. And I thought, nobody should feel that alone. So Caleb and I clapped for her. Just a small thing, nothing that should have changed anything." Rebecca felt tears starting already. "But it did change things," Henry continued. "That woman, you changed everything. You came into our lives and made us whole again. You showed me that it's okay to hope, okay to love again, okay to trust that not everyone leaves. You gave Caleb a mother figure who understands him in ways I never could, and you showed me what partnership really means." He brought his hands forward. In them was a small velvet box.
"I know you could buy any ring in the world," he signed, balancing the box carefully. "This one isn't expensive. I saved for 3 months to afford it. But it's real, and it's from my heart. Rebecca Hamilton, will you marry me?" Rebecca couldn't sign through her tears. She nodded frantically, then finally managed, "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Henry slipped the simple silver band onto her finger, and she'd never worn anything that felt more valuable. Caleb came running over, having watched the whole thing.
Does this mean Rebecca is going to be my mom? He signed, hope radiating from every movement. Rebecca knelt to his level, tears still streaming. If you want me to be. Caleb threw his arms around her. I've wanted that forever. Richard Hamilton attended his daughter's wedding. He walked her down the aisle of a small community center. Nothing like the elaborate venues he could have provided, but Rebecca had chosen it because it was where Henry and Caleb attended a weekly sign language group. Halfway down the aisle, Richard squeezed his daughter's hand and signed, awkwardly, slowly, the signs he'd been practicing for months. I'm proud of you. Rebecca stopped walking, stared at her father. He'd never learned sign language before, had always expected her to read lips to accommodate him. You learned? She signed. I'm trying, he signed back. I should have done this years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't enough to make up for 25 years of absence, but it was a start. Rebecca married Henry in front of a small gathering, mostly their Signal Bridge team and members of the deaf community who'd become their extended family. The ceremony was conducted in both English and ASL, every word translated so everyone could participate equally. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," and they did, Caleb cheered so enthusiastically that everyone laughed. 2 years later, Signal Bridge became an industry standard. Tech companies licensed their software, schools implemented it, hospitals used it to communicate with deaf patients. They'd helped millions of people connect across the barrier of hearing loss. But the real success was smaller, more personal. It was Rebecca coming home to find Caleb practicing a presentation for school, Henry cooking dinner in their new house, modest by her standards, perfectly extravagant by his. It was family game nights where Caleb won by cheating and they pretended not to notice. It was Henry and Rebecca working side by side at Signal Bridge, true partners in every sense. It was Rebecca finally feeling like she mattered. Not because her father's wealth or her company's success, but because two people had chosen to see her when she felt invisible. One evening, Rebecca found Henry on their back porch, watching Caleb play in the yard. "What are you thinking about?" she signed. "That day at the graduation," Henry replied. "I almost didn't stop, almost told Caleb we had to leave. I was so focused on the next delivery, the next dollar, just surviving. But he wanted to watch, and I said yes. Such a small decision, but it changed everything." Rebecca moved beside him, taking his hand. "You changed my life that day, you and Caleb. You saw me when I was invisible." "You were never invisible," Henry signed. "The world just wasn't looking at the right things, wasn't seeing who you really are." "And who am I?" Henry smiled. "You're Rebecca Williams. Brilliant businesswoman, incredible mother, love of my life, the woman who taught me that broken pieces can still make something beautiful." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their son, play in the golden evening light. She'd spent 25 years living in silence and loneliness, convinced she was broken, incompetent, unworthy of real love. But a single dad and his son had proven her wrong, had shown her that she wasn't broken at all, just waiting for her real life to begin. And it had begun on a graduation day when no one came, except the two people who mattered most. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever waited for someone to see you, know this. Sometimes the people who change everything show up in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes the kindness we give to strangers becomes the foundation of something beautiful. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please don't let it end here. Let it remind you, kindness still matters, compassion still changes lives, and hope is never wasted. Subscribe and be part of our Soul Lifts Stories family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. And if this moment moved you, share it, because sometimes sharing hope is the kindest thing we can do.